Hi everyone, it's Kathy Feather here with the Helping You Soar channel here on my YouTube and my LinkedIn account. We're going live today and today's a little different. So you normally hear me talk about travel items or you hear me talk about back office operations and how you can optimize and use tech and AI effectively for your business. Today we're taking an entirely different approach and I have a special guest with us here. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself shortly. But really, today we're talking a little bit about long-term care. And you're all probably wondering, I saw this show up in your feed, Kathy. Why are you talking about long-term care? Stay in your lane. And you're right, it's not my lane. And truth is, it's really important to my heart, though. So some of you know my story. I have had my parents residing with me since about 2010, following mom's cancer diagnosis and cancer treatments, which wiped them out financially during the Great Recession, and watching as my dad's health declined during COVID lockdowns and all the things, and helping them navigate that and help them navigate the funding of that without long-term care really was eye-opening to me. I had had a long-term care policy before that for myself, but they didn't. Many in the boomer population don't. And it's a little harder as you age to get those policies. But we're going to talk about some of the things you want to think about and some of the conversations you want to have in your families and really what that needs to happen, because I don't want anybody to be in the same place I was, because it was really hard to navigate, have some calls with a lot of different companies to try and find services, all while navigating like the decline of a parent's health. And you're already needing to focus on that. So this is not something you want to be focusing on that time. So with that, I want to introduce my guest. We have Josh with us. He's with New York Life, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and why he's here with me today to discuss this topic.
Oh, thank you very much, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Josh Buell. I am an agent with New York Life. I've been with the company for about 4 years after almost 20 years with my previous employer. I met Kathy through LinkedIn. We connected and just wanted to chat a little bit like people do on LinkedIn. And we found out that we had similar experiences to a degree with aging parents and parents that had needs beyond what was available for us to take care of. So we quickly sort of shared that bond, and she learned, I got to share with her that I work with a lot of long-term care clients, and I've gravitated towards that over the last, say, year and a half or so. I find it extremely satisfying and just a wonderful part of the work that I do when I'm able to help people put in place an extremely important part of their planning for now and in retirement and in those later years as well. I shared with Kathy my personal story and how I'm close to it. My great aunt, she didn't have much throughout her life. And when it came time for her care needs, when they exceeded what we could do to take care of her, my mom primarily, we sort of struggled and scrambled a little bit to find a facility that would be able to provide those same care needs for her. And my great aunt Alice didn't have really any means, and we were left with unfavorable options. We had to go the Medicaid route. And if anybody is familiar with that, it's not somewhere that you want to have anybody reside.
No.
And we did what we could as a family for her, but it was emotionally tough. It was financially tough, and the burden of that on us, and we're not taking away from what she went through, but it took a toll. And this was many, many years before I worked with New York Life. Fast forward about 10 years later, my grandmother, who passed away about a month and a half ago, she ended up needing full-time care about 2 years ago. Before that, she lived on her own till she was 97 years old, stayed with my mom for a few years, and then needed to move to a facility because her care needs exceeded what we could all do for her. She was 101 when she moved into there. She'd outlived her money. We didn't have any care planning. There was nothing in the cards that would have predicted the needs that she had at this point. She actually outlived pensions that were set up for the family for her grandfather, who was a veteran and veteran of two jobs, veteran of the Army, and then also he had a pension through Andrews Air Force Base, so two of them. But all of this was gone. There were reverse mortgages, all kinds of things. So we lucked out a little bit. We were able to find a nicer place than what we were able to do for my great aunt. They're sisters, by the way. But again, we went through this process where we couldn't. It wasn't easy. We had to make tough decisions for both of them, different decisions. But after going through both of these things, I still didn't really have a working knowledge of what it meant to prepare for these types of events or these types of needs. Now I'm acutely aware of what that means. I speak with people all day long, every single day, about either their own experiences with family members or their planning and a lot of times fear that they're going to relive some of these things personally. And I'm working with them to try to find ways to put assets in place that are going to be earmarked and designated to help not always pay in full, but at least contribute to the ever rising costs of long-term care across the country. So I take great pride in the role that I've got in the short-term, midterm, and long-term planning that goes into putting these other financial pieces of the plan in place so that when it comes time for those long-term care needs and more importantly, costs that come with them, we're not having to make difficult decisions on assets that were not supposed to be earmarked for that. We don't have to think about selling a home or draining a retirement fund. I've heard awful stories from people about having to watch their mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles and sisters and brothers go from living in a comfortable retirement scenario to having nothing in a matter of years, because it can cost six figures or more in some cases to live in a facility where that kind of care is necessary. So that might be a little bit of a long introduction there, but it is something that is personal. And
it is
not
personal.
my story. It's I take in all the stories that I hear from people on a daily basis. And
you and I bonded over it. It is personal. It is life stories. And as you and I discussed, folks our age, we're the sandwich generation. And I am blessed as well as probably cursed. I have no children. So if I don't get mine right, I don't even know who takes over.
Yeah.
And, those conversations, but those in your situation, you have aging parents and aging grandparents and children that you still need to care for.
Right.
And those monies go everywhere. Your kids are younger. You're going to have college at some point. And so there's a lot that goes into the overall, I'll call it Gen Xers and beyond situation, because we are living longer. And with that, unfortunately, sometimes does come, degrading health that we have to deal with. And hopefully folks learn to set themselves up in place and purchase homes or move to homes later in life that allow them to age in place in some respects. We learned in our house, our doorways weren't big enough for wheelchairs. So we had to use the transfer chair because they're slightly thinner and you could get around the house with that. We didn't have ramps and safety bars and all the things. And those are the things you have to really start thinking about. And yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
You mentioned some things that we didn't talk about the last time. So what you just said struck a chord with me. So my father is 73 and he's got about a 30-yard long driveway on about a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
And their whole entire front yard is that way. And their backyard, a little bit of flat with another 45-degree, 50-yard hill going straight up. And my father, a year and a half ago, just went through this incredibly lengthy and arduous surgery and rehabilitation process on a leg that he broke when he was in his early 20s on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And he's not walking the same. And it's affecting his opposite hip. And he is almost instantly and overnight far less mobile than he was. And then you throw in his back and his, just getting older. And there's things that he's facing now that they're facing around the house also that they did not anticipate. And it's been this 18-month period of time where life has changed at their house for both of them. My mom had
Yeah.
a meniscus surgery on one knee while she's caring for my dad's recovery after he's coming out of these other things. So
Yeah.
we mentioned degrading health, but people often have a misconception about
Yeah.
that, and they think, oh, cognitive decline, or
It's so many things.
it can be anything. And like my parents are 70 and 73, and they've got these very acute physical needs now that they didn't have 3 years ago. And it's this misconception that it's this other type of care and
Yeah.
that we're invalid. And it's not the case. It can be anything that causes the need for any
Yeah.
type of care.
I mean, you and I talked about it. I moved to Greenville here 3 years ago.
Mhm.
And as I was house hunting, it was finding a house that was going
Right.
to work for mom and I. And so it's zero to very low entry at the front. I
Mhm.
didn't need steps up to a house or anything else. We'd had that prior. I'd been down that road. And it was, master and bathroom on the main level for her. And it definitely diminished the quantities of places that were available
Sure.
to actually look at or that were going to give us. And we're very fortunate where we ended up. The house works perfectly for our needs, but it is like there's so much involved in this conversation. So we've
Yeah.
had a long introduction.
Yes.
So let's
Right.
give some people some practical steps and things they can think about. So we had talked about, what is the most unexpected way that providing for or caring for and coordinating the care of family, when it's financial, but it's also emotional, and many of us have to work for
Right.
our own finances, and so you're struggling through this with your career. Like, are there things and are there similarities that you often see that you can guide folks through?
What I see is so that the financially and emotionally pieces of the puzzle, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
That's what I think people don't anticipate. And whether they're spending their time, your time costs money, first of all. If you're not working, you're spending your time with somebody, but then you're burning out. I hear stories about people getting burnt out and not understanding who's going to anticipate what it takes. I mean, you live with parents who have those needs. My mother had her family come in, and we think, great, I'm going to be there. It's going to be not easy, but I'll be able to do more. But nobody knows what more means.
Yeah.
And I think the unexpected impact is just how overwhelming it is. And I hear that's one commonality that I hear with people who, that I've never met before. And they tell me that they were never going to be able to be prepared for the amount of time and energy that it took, no matter how little or great the needs were. That's the big one, where the unexpected part, nobody really anticipates the cost, but we know it's going to cost a lot. Everything costs more. So that's an easier pill to swallow,
Yeah.
relatively speaking. It's the time and emotion, I think, that I see and I hear about from people that they truly did not anticipate in any way. They thought it was going to be easier being closer and being present. It is not.
Yeah, it's a whole different challenge. I mean, you and I talked about the day that I was logged in, COVID lockdowns. I was logged into work and I was working on my job, and my father had his biopsy appointment in downtown Seattle, and we had arranged shuttle service through the insurance for that. He had just been released from a rehab facility after a medical mishap, and they called the rehab facility instead of us to confirm that ride.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than the rehab facility directing them to us, they just said, nope, he's no longer here. And the ride was canceled.
Yeah.
And so here we are, we're waiting for this ride pickup. I'm ready to help my mom, help the transport, get him into the car. And then all of a sudden they're not showing, and we're calling, and it's like, you don't have a transport. And so I literally run across the house back to my computer. Hi, team. I'm going offline. I have to take my dad to his biopsy. And last minute, just did it. And I worked with wonderful people, and they all helped in so many different ways. But just those unexpected, like, moment notice decisions that you even have to make that you didn't think you even, like, I thought I had that one covered.
Yeah. Then it brings to mind a quick story from, I've been living in my current house for about 18 months, my wife and our kids. My neighbor, he's a retired fireman. His wife still works So he's home, but his mother-in-law, his wife's mom, lives at the home. Well, up until about 3 months ago. They moved her into an assisted living facility nearby. She had lots of physical limitations and also some cognitive decline. I'm at home one day, and Billy is my neighbor. He knocks at the door at about 10 o'clock. This is in the fall. And I'm working. It's a middle of the week. And he's like, hey, I need your help real quick. My mother-in-law fell and I can't pick her up. And this is like, this is a real thing that stuck with me. And I'm trying not to hurt her. I'm trying to make sure she's okay. But he was left without any options. And this is the type of thing that, nobody considers, where Billy didn't consider this. They found a home that would be able to help her constantly shortly thereafter. But I mean, it struck a chord with me that, oh my gosh, had I not been home, he wouldn't have known what to do. And it could have been a lot worse. And this was just one tiny little thing in the middle of an innocuous hour of the day and in the middle of the week. And things like that, where what I do now means a lot more to me than in years past when I wasn't even aware of it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the single biggest misconception that people have about funding their long-term care. Compared to New York Life, compared to Medicaid is there, everybody has their Medicare. What is the biggest misconception you hear?
The biggest one, there's several, but I think the one that is most impactful is that there is some government assistance that goes beyond what it actually does. I can't tell you the number of people I speak to who are sure that Medicare is going to help them long term. And the most help that it will provide, no matter which kind you have, which additional package you've got, is 100 days. And even at that point, you've got to fall into a very specific set of criteria to receive some of the contributions to it. So I think that's the most impactful one, is that there's going to be something there for me for months or years if I need it. And folks are generally unaware that the limitations of the programs that everyone, for the most part, has access to.
Yeah. And I know you and I talked a little bit about Medicaid and the experience we both had in dealing with the Medicaid systems. And I remember the day we were on the phone for one of the interviews with Medicaid, and the Medicaid representative actually got upset with me because she was like, well, you realize you can be paid to be a caregiver. And so for people out there, that is an option. But the reality is I was the one responsible for all of the housing for the family. And the $15 an hour that they were going to pay for my father's care wasn't going to cut the bills. And just recognize there are some definite limitations. And as you get into the lower cost care and supports, it gets even harder.
A close second would also be that people are generally unaware of how exorbitant the costs have gotten for long-term care. So even if you are aware that there are limitations on the programs, on the length of the programs that are available, then the next page is, oh my goodness, this is going to cost how much? And that's the next shocking part of that a lot of times.
Yeah. So how can folks realistically determine if the premiums for a long-term care policy fit into their long-term budget? And are there potential out-of-pocket expenses that they need to consider in addition to that policy coverage? I know everyone's situation is a little different, but are there some general guidances we can give?
I would suggest that comprehensive planning is taking place, because like you said, it's different for everybody. The costs are driven by so many different things for long-term care planning, at least with New York Life. And there's always a potential for out-of-pocket costs. The work that I do is we don't like to say that it's a solution for your long-term care. It's a supplement, because there are so many variables that go into what will drive the costs that you incur. Are you going to be in your home? Are you going to be in a short-term facility? Is this a permanent residency situation? You have to speak with a professional and tell them your story, tell them your concerns, and have them explain to you what those limitations are. If you have a goal in mind for the supplemental costs that you want to have, available to be reimbursed or taken care of. That's a conversation to have with your professional so that you understand all of the moving parts that go into this. There is no one answer. And in fact, there's often several for each scenario that can be correct.
Yeah, I remember looking into my own policy with my own financial planner and all the options. And it was like, okay, I need a little more help in deciding, because even that felt overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a good step is, talk to a financial planner, and then they will often direct you towards the folks that can add these very specific pieces of your financial puzzle to your overall estate planning or your financial planning.
Yeah. Now, I know you and I talked about, I came from Washington State. Washington State is the first state to put into effect long-term care as a requirement of those living within the state. And I know there's some other states that are considering such legislation. For those that are considering potentially moving to one of these states or not, like, are policies portable? Are policies able to be combined with those benefits? Like, what does that look like for someone?
The answer could be yes or no. It depends on the laws that come into play for each of those states. I can't speak to any other states other than the ones that I do work in, but I would strongly suggest, to learn the answers to those questions, you contact your long-term care professional, and you'll get the state-specific and the situationally specific answers that you need. They could change. You could have two people from one state that are moving to two different places that do or don't have policies, and there's a lot of moving parts there too. But there are often solutions that can be identified depending on your needs and the information that you've got. That's one that I would say contact your professional, because those instances carry so many variables. It's an incredibly difficult thing to put a blanket answer on.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I know we talked about cost of care is rising faster than ever, faster than, people's raises and other things. How does a client determine if a benefit amount they're buying today is sufficient to cover?
The answer is going to be talk to your professional again, because they can often tell you some tools that can be incorporated into the planning that are intended to keep pace with inflation or rising costs. Yeah. And again, can't speak for the entire industry, but there are two parts to that, where you have to learn if the plan that you are looking into has that option available, because certainly, like you said, in 15 or 20 years, it's inevitable that everything will cost more, not just long-term care planning. So putting those safeguards in place, learning if they're available, seeing if they fit your goals is important. But that's something that certainly your financial professional can help you understand about the long-term care options that you're looking into.
Okay. And what about some of those non-traditional options for those whose budget is tight or they might not qualify for a plan? What alternative planning options should they discuss with their professional? And are there such things as hybrid type policies?
Yeah, there's a lot of options in the long-term care space. Alternative planning options may be something that's not a traditional long-term care plan, but it could be a repositioning of assets. It could be earmarking something for use down the road. There's a lot of creative ways. Essentially, you're figuring out what you hold and what you have that may be able to be put in reserve, perhaps. And this is, again, talk to a financial planner. But hybrid policies do exist in the industry. Everybody's got something different, but that is absolutely something that exists. And I would say speak with as many people as you can to figure out what they are. The best thing that you can do is talk to somebody, tell them your goals, tell them your needs. You tell them your story, and they are going to help you find something that fits that story.
Yeah, I know I personally had a hybrid policy, and it was a whole life along with long-term care policy. And then, like totally not long-term care, but in drafting my will, I had a statement that a girlfriend got some money for the care of my dog.
Wow.
Um, he he has since passed, but he had a very difficult personality, and we knew heading to a shelter and other things were not going to work for him. And so, like, we discussed options and came up with options for the dog. Really, truly, folks, anything is possible if you're honest about, like, I need X, Y, and Z. These folks that help you plan, they know their stuff. They will absolutely help you figure it out. So now, home versus facility.
Sure.
How do you evaluate plans based on their coverage for in-home care versus facility care? Or are they just different coverage amounts, but the policies cover both regardless?
All of those can exist, and in many cases they do. Um, I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm speaking for myself, but I do believe that a lot of people share the same opinion. When it comes to the point of my life where I'll need long-term care, also, it's likely 70% of people over 65 will have some type of long-term care event. It's what happens to all of us, and it doesn't mean permanent. It could be temporary, but it still would qualify as a long-term care event. I would prefer, if my finances allow and the level of care that I need allows for it, I'd prefer to be at home. I would absolutely prefer to be at home. A lot of the plans that are available, many of them do offer some level of home care reimbursement. Again, you've got to speak to your financial professional about it. Ask them that question specifically. If it is a desire to be at home as much as possible, tell that part of your story. It's people that I speak to often haven't really thought that through, and it's something that I ask them. Would you prefer to be in your home if possible? And then that opens up another sort of chapter in the book of this story that we're trying to tell. And short answer, home and facility care are available in the industry. You've got to speak with your professional to learn what those options are, and make sure that, again, they suit your needs and your goals for that type of planning.
Yeah. Now, I know we didn't talk about this one, but it's one I often hear myself. People get confused between disability insurance and long-term care, and they think I have disability, so I'm covered.
Yeah, yeah.
And personally, and I'm not in the insurance industry, I probably don't know enough, but disability is while you're working and have an income, it's meant to cover and provide you that income should you not be able to work.
Right. It's income protection versus reimbursement for your care needs, wherever and whenever that occurs. So yes, I actually have that conversation pretty often with folks too, where it could be an employer-based option that they have, and they've got a misconception that it's going to cover one or the other or both. And then, we've got to get the details for their plan, and they've got to ask the folks on their side at work and things like that, or from their insurer to get that definition. But that's another part of the conversation that I have with people. We ask, what do you have, either employer offered or personal, so that I know that what I'm giving feedback on is going to either fill a gap, fill a need. And the last thing I want to do is put something in place that isn't necessary or the wrong thing. So I've got to be very, very specific and acute with the questions. But that is something to make very clear with folks, particularly when they have very little or no knowledge on any of the long-term care planning or even their disability policies.
Yeah. Okay. So vetting care providers. So when someone's looking to evaluate a care facility or an agency, what are 2 to 3 questions they should ask that go beyond simply checking licensing requirements? Because the state kind of handles that for us. Should they be considering proximity, single room versus shared room? Does that even exist in the world anymore? And elected versus required care. Those types of things. And like waiting periods. Do people have waiting periods?
Yeah. So I know, and again, I'm not speaking for the entire industry, but waiting periods can and are a part of the long-term care plans. So that's another thing to consider. How how are you going to pay for your care out of pocket during that waiting period? And then when you're vetting your facility, I mean, you want to know, I think the first two you mentioned, proximity and single versus multiple room occupancy is an important one. Personally, for me, I told my story earlier. My mom found a facility for my grandmother, single room, and it was less than 5 miles from her house. So
Wow.
that, yeah, she could go over and like have lunch, and it
Yeah.
wasn't like she's driving across town. I mean, she was driving down the street.
Yeah. No,
We
that's fantastic.
brought
I mean,
Christmas trees into my
yeah,
grandmother's room because we could fit them in the truck, and we'd set up and like do this. But yeah, ask, think about it from your own seat. And if you're vetting it for a family member or a friend, what are the comforts you want? What are the things that you would want to have available if you had to stay there? That's what I would suggest. That's how my mom approached it when she
yeah,
was having these interviews with folks, is if I had to stay here, what do I want and need available? Now, of course, anything that goes beyond that, my grandmother specifically needed, we needed to make sure that was there, the different types of
right.
medical care and assistance. But
Memory care and different
memory,
things.
yeah,
Yeah.
all of those things. But the comforts, the talk to the people that work there. Talk to as many of them as you can. Get to know them. Get a feel for who works there and the type of facility that it is. I know I went on a few of these, and I'm not trying to disparage the facilities that I saw, but some of them I didn't get a great feeling from, and it it was an easy decision to walk away from some of them. And if I put myself in the shoes of the resident, then it was an easier way to approach some of the vetting that wasn't very specific to maybe the medical needs of my grandmother.
Yeah. Now, what would you say, folks our age,
Hmm.
many of us haven't had true financial conversations necessarily with our parents and
Right.
estate planning conversations with our parents. Tips and tricks for how they can approach that, how they can involve someone like yourself or
Sure.
another professional in that conversation, because it is uncomfortable to
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
Mom and Dad, what have you done, and where do we sit so that I know what I have to
Mhm.
contend with. And it can come off as, I'm pointing fingers or blame, and that's not it at all.
Right.
In my parents' situation, it was just bad timing.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a good question. And I would, so some of the questions that I ask people, where do you, where are you planning to be when you're in those years? Not like we know when we're going to need care, but
Yeah.
where do you want to spend your retirement years, or where do you want to be after age
Yeah,
50 or
you've
60?
retired from work.
Yeah.
Are you gonna go live closer to the grandkids?
Right.
Like, what does that look like? Yeah.
Who do you have available that could provide assistance if it was needed? Um, who would be willing to provide that
Yeah,
assistance?
I think that's the one of the bigger
That's a big
questions
one.
that's uncomfortable.
I I speak with a lot of people, and this is a tough thing to talk about, but a lot of them will tell me, like, I've got relatives here, or I've got this many kids, and I don't think they would want to, or I don't think they could. I don't think they'll be in a position to, for any number of reasons. Could
Yeah.
be logistics, could be their station in life. It could be because the relationship isn't strong enough to rely on that. Or maybe they've got a big family full of kids of their own, and the time just wouldn't allow, even if they intended to. So, um, yeah, you want to approach your parents and ask them what they think will happen if that's a need. And I'd be able to tell my mom quickly, well, I live an hour and 15 minutes away. The expectation that I would be able to be present while having a wife and 3 kids an hour and 15 minutes in the opposite direction isn't realistic.
Yeah.
I could help contribute financially, but for how long, I'm not sure. But for being present and being assistance to whatever situation arose, I couldn't be relied on. Not because I didn't want to. I physically could not be there. So those are good questions, good conversations to have, because it will open up to other things, and it will lead to those conversations where, okay, we all need to sit down and plan for what this is going to look like, because that's the reality. And I that's a tough thing to think about that most people probably haven't thought about.
Yeah. No, I'll be honest, and until my mom's cancer diagnosis, and even then, I went down to Oregon. They were living in Prineville, Oregon.
Mhm.
I went down to Oregon to be there as support when mom came out of the hospital, and they returned home. They were over in Portland for the surgery and then drove home. And I was there for 2.5 weeks, and then the company I was working with at the time just stopped talking to me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it wasn't time for me to go home, but it was time for me to go
Yeah.
home to
Yeah.
figure that out. And it, 5.5 hour drive. It's like,
Mhm.
can't turn around and be here tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
And so real conversations about what does this look like for you for the next week or so until I can figure things out and get back. So
Yeah.
they're uncomfortable conversations, and
Yeah. The
but
sooner you have them, the
important to
better.
have.
Yeah.
The sooner the better. Like, I think I told you, post my dad passing, we filed bankruptcy for my mom.
Yep.
I wish we had explored that earlier,
Right.
because I think we could have handled some of my dad's care and so many other stressors that they were dealing with
Mhm.
better. But I didn't know how bad the debt was
Right.
until he passed, and then mom and I were having a real conversation.
Mhm.
And the attorney at the time for the bankruptcy, her exact comment to me, your mom's not collectible. She's on Social Security. That's her only income, which 100% true. And it was like, but if I tell them that, they don't stop calling, right? And it's like, no, they're going to keep calling. They're going to try and get you to pay her debts. And it was like, let's take care of the bankruptcy.
Well, and that's funny you mentioned that, because my mom was the leader in navigating my grandmother's situation in the
Yeah.
last couple of years. But that was because she led the effort to take care of my great aunt 10 years prior. Had it been reversed, the other one would have experienced, the opposite
Yeah.
the process. And if there was only one, if it was just my great aunt or just my grandmother, that first experience that my great aunt Alice went through, where we had to go through Medicaid and make sure that the finances were as low as they needed to be and find the place, like that would have been my grandmother's experience, because my mom had been through the ringer and was able to help with all of that. And I'm sorry, the light in here just went out. I'm in a room. I'm not
The
moving.
fun of being live.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything just started getting dim all of a sudden as I'm telling the story. I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I've also talked to people about this, and they've said that their first experience with a family member going through long-term care needs led to a better one with subsequent family members, because they learned all of these pieces, oftentimes in an uncomfortable, very difficult way. And now they were able to manage it better. But having the conversations earlier, planning for it as much as possible, will alleviate a lot of that.
Okay. So final question,
Mhm.
and this is really considering all we've discussed here, affordability, state programs, knowing your needs.
Yeah.
What's the single most important step that the viewers today should take this week or next to start moving forward with their own planning journey?
Have the conversations. If you've got a financial planner, an estate planner, go have the conversation. See if that gap exists in what your life's plan is. Talk to your family members. See if anybody has given any of this any consideration. Have the conversations with all of the people who are going to impact and affect the outcome of when this happens to 70% of us over 65.
Yeah.
That is the most important thing we can do. It's not go out and get a plan. It's not go spend a bunch of money. Go have the conversations with the people that are going to inevitably be a part of this if and when it happens. And from there, you start to get in front of the right people who can offer solutions and ask more questions of you to learn exactly what needs to be put in place. But you've got to go have the conversations first to learn if this is the right thing for you, and not just you, but your family.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to check our LinkedIn feed and our YouTube feed to see if we have any questions. Meanwhile, how can people reach you if they have personal questions and would like to discuss their own situation?
I can offer an email address and a phone number. I'd love to speak to anybody. I get joy out of sharing information, so I love to be a resource. If nothing else, it's important that everyone has access to the information, whether they take it and do nothing with it, or use it 5 years from now, or use it immediately, I'd be happy to share the information. Should I put the contact information in here?
We'll put it in the LinkedIn and the YouTube notes,
Okay.
so that they have it there. And then we will also, we're connected on LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah.
So if you want to reach out and have a more personal conversation, and kind of discuss things before you set that appointment, definitely do that. You can find Josh through my LinkedIn account.
Yeah. And I'd be happy to just provide as much information as possible to help the right decision be made.
Okay. Well, I don't see any comments right now. We'll kind of monitor that for the next week or so, on the event. And if there's comments, we can definitely talk to them there, or say it's an individual situation that needs to be discussed, like with your own planners. But we can kind of go from there. But any final parting words?
Yeah. Just have the conversation sooner than later. Don't wait until it's a need. Be proactive about it. It's not as scary to talk about once it's on the table, and you find that it's just important. It's just as important as retirement planning, or succession planning, or wills, or trusts. It is a part of all of those things. So have the conversations, learn the information, and just put that topic on the table.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree. And don't wait for the situation to rear its head before you have those conversations. Like we talked about in the beginning, you were in the financial and the emotional turmoil at that point. So the earlier you can have them and be prepared, the better off you are.
And when those situations, also, one quick note, another thing that people, I have this conversation a lot too. People will tell me, well, I am in a care event, or my family member is in a care event now. That's when it's too late to use the long-term care planning. At that point, most folks are ineligible. So then alternatives immediately become the solution. And some of those are difficult too. So
so it's kind of like your auto insurance. You need to have it before you need it. You can't have the accident and then go shopping for it.
Exactly. Yep.
We did have a user there on LinkedIn say thank you. They're very excited about the content and what you've been sharing. So I just want to also share my thanks. Like I said, this is a topic that's really important to my heart. And I just really want folks to take the time and the energy needed while they can before they need it, to take those steps. So it has been a pleasure, Josh.
All right. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so glad that we met and got to talk about this. Thank you.
All right.